And the thing is, if you put I don't know if you folks know this out there, but if you put a drywall screw into a copper water line, you don't know it right away because it takes it like a couple weeks for it to start leaking until the screw starts to corrode. That's another thing I know the hard way. Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined by Associate Editor Matt Milham.
Hello.
And Rob Watzak, Digital Brand Manager.
Hey.
You can email us your questions at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. How you guys doing today? Thanks for being here.
Doing all right.
Doing all right.
I'm just looking at what everybody's wearing, and like people get like weird ideas, like it's either really warm or it's really cold.
I'm freezing in this building all the time. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I wear my toque indoors. You guys have seen that, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm hanging on to summer.
Yeah.
Short sleeves.
And you got that great wool hat on that's keeping you warm, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's with no hair, that's key.
What have you guys been working on? That's the first part of the show.
Still working on that bedroom. Got the closet. Well, I got the built-ins mostly done. Ran out of wood, but the basic frame is there.
So what are you building? Cabinets?
Just it looks almost like IKEA stuff.
So like
it's just,
closet organizer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, it's like I don't know. There's 18 boxes, 6 by what is it?
How can that closet be that big?
It's almost 8 feet long, and
you have how many boxes?
18, 3 by 6.
Are they like 6 inches wide?
No, they're like, 14 3/4 wide.
Okay.
Wide enough for your shirts.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you made like little cubby holes to put stuff in.
Yeah, essentially. I have a picture. I should have given it to you.
Well, maybe next time.
You can see what a mess it is in there right now.
And you've been like getting ready for solar panels.
Yeah. I ran around this week. No actual projects, that I would call projects, but basically prepping for roofers, which are coming next. And I was really stressed out at the beginning of this week, and I just couldn't really put my finger on it. I mean, it was
You want to talk about it, Ron?
Yeah, it was definitely helping my daughter do her homework. And that's stressful for a teenager, but
it's stressful for parents helping a teenager.
Yeah.
I can tell you.
But and there were all these other things going on, and then I realized that in the back of my head, I was just thinking about the fact that it's winter's coming, and some guys are supposed to show up at my house and tear the whole roof off, and I usually do stuff like that myself, but my house is about 40 feet tall, and I don't really want to fall off of a roof. Yeah, so I mean, I could set up to tie in, but I'm 46 years old.
It would also take you a long time.
I don't do that kind of stuff anymore. If I had a nice flat ranch, I'd consider it. But so, going around, building a little roof over my mini split compressor outside because it's 30 feet below where they're going to be dropping shingles.
Oh, they would destroy that almost immediately, for sure.
And then taking chicken wire and wrapping some of my wife's favorite shrubs.
Yeah.
And hopefully that'll help. But...
So you have 2 layers of shingles on there, as I recall?
Yeah, as far as I know. 2 layers of shingles and plywood over unusually wide board sheathing. I mean, there are gaps between it, like 2-inch gaps between it, but the boards themselves are something like 10, 12 inches wide. So I'm not sure what kind of roof was on this house originally back in 1871.
My guess is slate.
But I don't know, maybe. I mean, I don't know. Most of the houses in my neighborhood have that still have old roofs on them have those tin tiles.
Yeah,
but
those last forever.
Yeah, you can always paint them as long as they don't rot away.
I bet you didn't have that because it'd probably still be up there.
Yeah, maybe.
Slate or wood shingles is my guess.
Yeah. Actually, it could be because the vinyl. Well, no, the vinyl's newer than the roof, so I don't know. So we can only guess.
So what's going to happen next? So they're going to come and roof?
Yeah, I stayed home early yesterday morning waiting for the roofers, and they got here, unloaded some shingles. Now, they're not working for me, they're working for the solar company. So I was like, I didn't want to be too nosy or pushy. I was going to wait till they got settled in to sort of point out some things that I want.
They love when you point out things.
Shingles go on the roof.
I was trying to. I was doing good. I was trying to hold back because the
You've been in that situation.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
So waited. They unloaded all their shingles, stacked them neatly in this driveway, and then they were there for a little bit, and then they left. And I was in the house, and then 10 minutes later, I hear the dumpster getting dropped off. I'm like, oh, great. They're probably just coming back. Sat there working on my computer in the kitchen, and then I noticed like an hour and a half had gone by, and nobody's there. And I call the solar company. They're like, oh, yeah, the dumpster's not coming today. So they had to bail. I'm like, well, the dumpster's been sitting in my driveway for almost 2 hours now. So, but with
how does it feel like to be like every other person who contracts like services?
No, I know, and honestly, if it weren't for the fact that winter was coming out, I could care less if they came back a month from now. But it's just that the
except you have this dumpster sitting in your driveway, I presume.
I don't really care.
Have the neighbors started filling it yet?
I haven't taken a look.
I would take a peek in there. Yep. I might come by after some stuff.
One of my daughter's friends' moms dropped her off the other day and saw the dumpster sitting there. She's like, "Oh, isn't it wonderful to have a dumpster in your driveway?"
Yeah, she's gonna be the one.
Yeah,
we had a little caper on Sunday. It reminded me of dumpsters, so I've been trying to get rid of this what is relatively new sofa that we just don't have room for, and we finally found someone who wants it. And for a while they were saying, oh, we'll come get it. Well, my wife ran into this person a couple days before Sunday and said, do you still want that sofa? And she said, oh, yeah, we'll be over soon to get it. She's like, we're bringing it to you. So we get this address, we load it in the truck on Sunday morning, and then we get to the house. We don't even knock on the door. We just like leave it in the front lawn.
That's the way you got to do it.
I was like, we could have done this much closer to home.
Just left it on your neighbor's lawn.
Someone else's lawn. I hope it was the right house. I was imagining what the news story would be like. Yeah, we just came home to this sofa on the lawn, and it's pretty nice. I don't know why they left it here.
As long as you didn't like drop an ID or something like that between the cushions, you're probably safe.
I should have checked. Uh-oh. We're going to get caught. So on Saturday, I had a busy day with my buddy Matt Kenny, who used to work at the Taunton Press, and he's converting his 2-car garage into a workshop. And the first order of business was before insulating it and cleaning up is to close off this overhead door and infill it with studs and put a couple windows in there. So we did that in about 4 hours over the weekend. And it was a fun project, wearing a tool belt and making a mess in someone else's house that you could then leave. But one of the most notable experiences of this, and maybe you guys have done this before, but I had to like detension the overhead garage door. It had these huge torsion springs above the door that help counteract the weight of the door and lift it.
Right.
And I've never done this before. I know it's a potential threat, right? There's a ton of energy in these springs.
Yeah.
And so the springs are wound with like a pair of steel bars. And then once they're tensioned, there's a locking bolt or nut screw that holds it in its position. And I put my crescent wrench on this square-headed bolt, and I had my steel bar in the end of this spring, and I loosened it up, and oh my God, there is so much tension on this thing. I'm just like, holy crap. So we're using a pair of bars, you slowly unwind it, and it's taking a long time. I'm like, I don't really know if this is getting any less tension on it. So I was like, Matt, you want to try for a while?
I'm going to go stand over here.
I'm going to stand over here. And he unloosened it, and then we did the other side, and it worked just fine. And then just for kicks, we went to pick up the garage door without the springs helping to lift it up, and we could not budge it. It was so impossibly heavy. So if you guys have that project, get ready, because it's going to feel like it's going to rip your arm right off and blow up in your face. So be careful.
So, I had a similar experience trying to repair a spring on one of those lift tables. It's like a little rolling cart you have in a workshop that you can raise or lower it. And this one would automatically raise up as you took weight off of it to keep the work surface at the same height. And
cool.
You had to compress the spring, this little mini car-like coil spring, something like 2 inches to get it in there, and it was just really awkward. And I built some jigs out of plywood and clamps to try to do it, but still, I basically wrapped the entire thing with ratchet straps just so that if it did
It wouldn't explode.
blow, it wouldn't take off somebody's head on the other side of the shop.
I was scared, so I let Matt do the second one, and he didn't have the experience of first like freeing it from the shaft it's on, and he's like, "Oh my God, this is really tight." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. That's why you're doing it." So that was exciting, but.
So now you got a picture of that door, and I noticed that you went right down to the ground with the sheathing on his driveway there. Did you have any plans for flashing that?
It isn't all the way down. We kept it up a ½ inch, but so he's going to put some aluminum down there, and I think I've convinced him to put vinyl siding on it because the rest of his house has aluminum siding, which you're not going to match. And he was talking about like, how's he going to put the clapboards on and paint it this time of year? And I'm like, dude, just put some freaking vinyl on there, and it's like done. And when he sells the house and they want to convert it back to a garage, it's going to be really easy to undo. So I think it's the right solution for that. And he bought what are arguably the absolute cheapest windows from the home center, all vinyl, new construction window, and they were not bad. I got to say, I think he told me they were $140 a pop. It's amazing you can buy a window for that to me.
Yeah,
and they're not bad, and they're so little they were easy to install because they don't rack.
Is that going to be a conditioned space or?
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I think he's going to heat and cool it with a mini split.
Nice.
Yeah.
So speaking of conditioned workshop spaces, isn't that
that's our next question?
Where we're going next?
Yeah. You want to do it?
Sure. So this is from Jamie. Is that in Royal, Georgia?
Jamie from Royal, Georgia. Yeah.
It's not Jamie Royal from Georgia.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, anyway, so Jamie says that I live in Georgia, climate zone 3A. I'm in the process of planning for a new detached garage. Primarily will be used as a workshop and a storage area for lawn equipment. Looking at about a 24 by 24 footprint.
Go bigger.
Yeah, you always want bigger, right? You never have enough room.
It's not big enough.
And he's in a homeowners association, so their regulations say that it has to match aesthetically as close as possible to the house, meaning siding, style of windows, asphalt, architectural shingles. And he's a DIYer, so he's going to leave the inside unfinished until he can get to it as time allows. So he's looking to actually hire it out, and is talking to people about the cost and getting some quotes. But he's got a bunch of questions for us about the construction details. So he's wondering, one, about the foundation type, monolithic, poured slab, or traditional footings. Should he go with 2x4s or 2x6s for the walls? Should he bother insulating or conditioning it? He wants to think about a steep roof so that he can use some of that extra space above for an office or some other storage space. And he's also asking about whether he should go with traditional rafters or trusses, and then that kind of leads into other framing questions.
So
like
let's start at the
I-joists.
bottom, right? Let's start with the foundation.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know what I would do.
Yeah, I
What's
like
that?
the monolithic slab.
Yeah,
Haunch slab.
thickened edge slab, right? Especially where he's at. He doesn't need to hide any mechanicals in the basement or what have you, so I think that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Assuming the lot is not too sloping, you are somewhat limited if you have a real hilly lot to something other than a slab.
Now, being a simple structure, a workshop space, and he's trying, he's definitely on, seems like he wants to maximize his budget here. It seems like a single slab pour makes the most sense from cost perspective. But I was poking around in the Fine Homebuilding break time forum and found a bunch of guys talking about a similar topic. And one guy said that he had done just that, poured a thickened slab. It was 5 inches in the middle and 12 inches at the outside.
5 inches, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, I guess it was a workshop. He wanted heavy vehicles or something like that in there. But he said, it worked out well, but he said if he would do it again, he would do footings and a wall and pour the floor afterwards. He was saying...
Washing vehicles.
Yeah, washing vehicles, water, just for framing purposes, getting the wall up off the ground. he also said that he felt like if he wanted to insulate the slab, it would have been a lot easier if he had the footing in place and then put the foam down and poured the slab afterwards. I mean, and it's more steps, but there's definitely things to consider. Water, getting your wood framing above the ground. Some people suggested that if you could do a monolithic slab, maybe then you could run a course of block or something on top of it to get it up off the ground. So
I would toss a pole barn post frame construction into the mix too. So in this case, you would dig holes that receive concrete, and the traditional way is you actually set the posts in concrete. But the way I did it on my shop was to use post bases and use concrete below grade, and then 6x6 posts above, and connect them to the concrete pier with a post base. And that's a good thing for a DIYer, I would say, because the forming is minimal and it's easy to build incrementally that way. You don't need to do a whole bunch of stuff at once. You could theoretically dig a single pier and pour it and do that, however many you need. And that's part of the reason I did it. The other is lower cost.
Yeah.
There's less concrete in a post frame building than in a thickened edge slab or a conventional stem wall foundation.
Yeah. This guy's hired someone though.
Yeah.
So now, on your particular barn, you would use those post bases, and the one thing that I always find with when you do the piers like that or the round footings like that is that then you've got concrete that's protruding from the edges of your structure of your building, right?
Yes, right. They look like little feet that are holding up the posts. And I've always said I was going to hide that with a water table on the barn, just pad it out a little bit, but I've never bothered. I quit noticing.
Yeah. The Amish used to build a lot of like cattle barns and other different kinds of structures where I used to live. And I don't know, they built one on a site where we were building a house. And I don't know, but it looked like they were just sticking these posts in the ground. I don't know what else they were putting around them, but they were just hand digging holes and then
I think that's what a lot of people did, and then you
ground.
backfill with concrete.
Yeah, and maybe there was concrete. I didn't see any.
Yeah.
But I mean, it looked like they were sort of like putting everything up and like getting everything plumb and level just with like timbers, and then maybe setting everything after that. I don't know.
I mean, you figure in the old days when people set fence posts, a lot of times people have a bucket of creosote or some tar or something, and they'd soak the ends of the posts in that or paint that stuff on.
And if you backfill with gravel, I think that's probably a pretty long-lasting assembly.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of getting off topic because it sounds like he's not building an Amish cattle barn. So.
No.
Well, the principles are the same.
Yeah.
But
what for walls going up?
I mean, he's in Georgia. I looked up the temperatures down there in the winter. It's
2x4.
It's in the 50s.
Yeah, I think but if he's going to want to cool it, if you're in Georgia in the summertime in a shop, it's going to be freaking hot. So I would think I would still do 2x4s.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say so. I mean, you definitely if you're thinking of conditioning it, you got to do some air sealing and insulation there. But of course, if you got garage doors, you got to pay attention to that too because they're usually
they're terrible,
leaky.
Yeah. Carriage doors are better if you can do that.
Yeah, if it's going to be a workshop, maybe carriage doors wouldn't be such a bad idea with some good flashing.
Yeah.
And
I like the idea of a loft space. I have one in my barn, and that's actually my favorite part of it. It's just I like sloping ceilings. It's very cozy up there. It's nice space.
Now he asked about trusses versus rafters, and so a lot of the truss companies will build what they call an attic truss, which basically has a square framed out in the middle of the truss for a room. If you're going to do that,
I got two problems with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you about it.
Well, let me just finish first. I've never dealt with anything like that before, but it seems like the pros are you've already got all your floor and wall framing done in one step. And
it comes on a truck.
It comes on a truck.
And you put it up
if you
there.
got access, it goes up quick, and it's not, it's all consistent. The problems I see with it are you lose a lot of space, usable space up in that attic. But I mean, if you're looking to make an office versus a storage space, maybe that's not such a bad thing.
Well, okay. So here's my beef with these things. So trusses are normally spaced 2 feet on center, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you possibly bring a staircase up between the trusses that you cannot cut right?
They must have a.
You
They
can't-
must have the truss company must have a solution for that. Right?
Yeah, I mean they have to.
Yeah.
When you get your truss package, I mean
or
you get
you
them
have
like
to access it from the exterior wall, from the gable
Or
end.
maybe you just those last two you frame conventionally.
It seems like a huge problem to me. And I bet there is a solution, but it means you're going to have a bunch more trusses. They're not all going to be the same. You're going to have the complexity of figuring that out.
Yeah, but he's not going to be the one figuring it out. The guys putting it on are going to be figuring it out.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's nice because you can get that 24-foot or bigger span with a truss pretty easily, and it's going to be a lot harder to get that with conventional lumber without putting
A girder in.
beam. Yeah, without putting a girder in. So, I mean, it definitely simplifies the whole.
I'm betting, though, you're not going to get very much loading with a 24-foot long attic truss, I got to say. I think it's going to be made for, light storage, not like a home office.
Yeah.
So look into those if you're going to do this,
2x8
Jamie.
bottom cord.
Yeah, and anybody out there who's had experience with this, go ahead and send us an email.
Even if you haven't.
Even
Even
if
if you've
just
got
some-
like strong opinions.
Yeah.
I'm really wound up today. I had
We noticed.
share-sized Reese's Pieces before I came into the room. It was supposed to be like for 3 people.
No.
Exciting.
But he also asked if you condition it, and definitely. I mean, otherwise you're going to get baked out of there. You're not going to be able to use that.
Yeah, and if you
loft
want to make
space as an
furniture and
office.
stuff too, like you can't have the temperature swings and humidity swings that you're going to experience in an unconditioned shop, right? That's
Sure. And then, backing up a couple of steps to the foundation, you definitely want to consider doing a little bit of rigid foam underneath that slab. I think they recommend in that climate, if you've got a slab, I think it's R5. There's a good article on
an inch.
Green Building Advisor. Yeah, and one of the big reasons to do that is just to minimize condensation, especially if you're using it as a woodworking shop.
You think that's an issue in Georgia?
Yeah, humid, hot summers.
Do you think that slab's going to get below the dew point?
I don't know. We'll have to look into that.
I don't know. I think that insulated slabs make for better concrete too, because you don't have the rapid drying and shrinkage cracks that are associated with concrete that dries, both ways. That's my take. Although the people who pour slabs say that they curl, which there's more to that than they know. Should we do another one here?
Sure.
Did we answer
Did
Jamie's
we cover all those
questions?
questions? I think we covered the main points there.
And I think it is Jamie Royal from Georgia.
Yeah, I figured that.
That was wrong. Sorry, Jamie.
Next.
Okay. Jim Collins of Burlington, Ontario writes, "Hello, Fine Homebuilding energy nerds." I take exception to that. No, I don't. I love the show and do appreciate the content you all sweat over on a weekly basis. That's very nice. I have a home in Burlington, Ontario, just west of Toronto. The home was built in the early 70s and has some serious energy holes that I would like to improve. One of the more obvious areas of concern is the main floor pop-out window on the north side. The home is a split level, and this window area either has been added or is part of the original 70s construction. Well, that's pretty profound. So it was either added or it's not. Regardless, the 210 joist bays of the main floor stop at the 2x10 rim joist that is oddly penetrated by 2x4s, which seem to cantilever out to support the extension of this window area. My question is one of insulation and air sealing, of course. The area is inaccessible from outside as the window area is fully surrounded by wood decking installed flush with the ground level. From inside the basement, I am finishing out a wood shop and can access the rim joist, but am nervous to pierce through it at any great measure in order to fix this issue. One thought is to use a slow-rise foam product installed into holes bored through the rim joist. Another option is to bite the financial bullet and sub it out to a dense pack cellulose company if they would come out for such a small job, and have them drill the holes and fill it full of cellulose. The last option is to cut out the rim joist in sections one by one, insulate with cut and cobble, and then replace the rim joist as 2x10 blocking. I would love to hear your ideas and best methods for this. Hopefully, in the words of Rob Yegid, you don't need more information. I think we...
Really
funny.
We're going to put that on on the website somewhere.
Need more
Don't
information.
Rob Yigan.
I think that's a really good question. So these things are notoriously an energy pig, right? These bow windows and bay windows that stick out from the plane of the building. And what would you do about this, Rob? Do you have these on your house?
No. My house is nice and straight on the outside, right down to the foundation. But I've worked on houses like this a bunch, and one of them, it wasn't actually a bay; it was an entire side of the house was built this way,
Cantilevered over the foundation.
Yeah, and it was a wall that plumbing to a kitchen sink and a bathroom toilet were in.
Oh, that's good.
So they ran the pipes out through the rim joist,
practically.
and then up through the wall into
Yeah.
these little bump outs.
Was that a
And-
problem?
Yeah, so that's the whole reason I was there. That's the whole reason I was working with
A lot of frozen pea.
I was working on the house, and I was working for somebody else, and their solution was to basically we stripped the siding and the sheathing off in this area that we wanted to access. I mean, this was a little drastic because we knew there was plumbing inside there. I mean, in his case, you're really just looking to get it airtight and a little bit of more R value to it. But,
Maybe that's what you're looking for. I'm looking to go drastic.
yeah.
Yeah.
But so we ended up, I never would have had the confidence to use this method if I hadn't worked on that spray foam video or article that I think you and Justin worked on a bunch of years back, right?
Gosh, yeah.
And
I'm still
we were testing those,
recovering
those
from that.
kits, those little kits that look like barbecue gas tanks.
Yeah.
And I was
For
like,
those of you listening aren't familiar, so it's spray polyurethane insulation. It comes in 2 tanks that are the size of the ones that would you'd fill up to put on your gas grill, right?
Yep.
And they have a set of hoses, and you connect all this stuff up, and you're basically making your own spray foam that like the spray foam contractor would make from 2 components.
Yeah, and the key to that, because before having worked on that article with you guys, I had, you think, oh, is it going to come out the right consistency? Is it going to clog up in the hose if you wait too long? And there were a couple of tricks in there involving temperature and I think putting some like grease or Vaseline on the tip of the
connections.
gun.
Yeah,
and it actually worked really well. We filled the whole cavity with foam and then patched the sheathing, patched up the house wrap, and put the siding back on. That's a little drastic for something like this. I think, especially since he has access from the rim joist inside. There was, I think, a finished space inside the basement of this house.
not 2 because you can see the framing.
Yeah.
So what do you think you'd do? You drill through that blocking?
I think I probably would, cut some big enough holes to access it and do it from inside there and patch it back together by hand. I mean, that's just sort of my MO, just with personal home projects. I do know some people who have used that slow rising foam before and had good luck with it in their house. And obviously it's a lot less invasive way to do it, but you don't really know what's behind that space when you're just drilling a couple of holes in there.
And what do you say, Matt?
Yeah, I also like the whole idea. I mean, I think you can
From
go
the inside.
Yeah, from the inside, because you can drill
You guys are crazy.
a decent-sized hole in that thing. I think,
But
like 3 inches?
how are you going to fill it the whole way and know it's full?
It's only 18 to 24 inches deep, so you can drill holes. I mean, it's more than 1 bay long, so you can look through one, just shine a flashlight in there, start at the back, and work your way
I'm
forward.
so skeptical of this.
So would you actually cut it out completely?
I would go on the outside and pull out the deck boards and attack it from the outside.
I don't know. I mean, what's your reason for not wanting to disturb the rim joist from the inside? It just seems like the Sawzall and the multi-tool.
I think you're going to be filling the ground with spray foam. I think it's just going to ooze out the other side and pour all over the soil.
Put your little inspection camera in there, see what it looks like.
You guys are all wet.
And it may be. I mean, it may go right to the ground, but you never know. Yeah, taking up those deck boards is probably going to be pretty easy. You only need to take up a few.
Deck boards is not hard.
Yeah.
But you still got to get underneath it, right?
Jeff, can we see
There's
the
not
shot
really
of
much
the
underneath
inside
it.
again?
It looks like it's maybe only a foot or so off the ground.
So, and if his hardwood flooring ran the other way, I would very seriously consider pulling up the boards inside the bay window and work from the top down.
Yeah.
So maybe that's an option to pull out 1 or 2 of them.
I don't know. You seem to like to disturb finished materials. It's always like my last, especially inside a living room, my last choice would be to disturb. I mean, siding maybe. I would maybe pull some siding and do it from the outside, cut some holes. But honestly, the rim joist just seems like the path of least resistance to me.
Yeah, you can drill that hole and then stick a camera in there.
So
or your iPhone,
you guys are
just shine a
assuming
little
that
light,
there's
take a picture.
blocking installed in these cantilever joists that aligns with the rest of the exterior wall. Is that correct? And you're assuming that there's an empty cavity on the other side that you're going to fill with spray foam.
I'm hoping that there is some sort of thing.
So the thing is, the idea that you're just going to get a big hole saw, get a Sawzall and a multi-tool. The thing is, one thing I've realized when you're cutting holes, especially in material...
Holes is holes.
Yeah.
Go big.
It takes just as much work to patch a small hole as it does to patch a big hole. So if you need more access, cut a big hole and throw a piece of blocking back in there when you're done, if you're really worried about it.
Yeah.
At least as some exploratory surgery. I mean, I would certainly at least... you're not going to... No one's going to be sad to see a piece of that rim joist go. But your wife might have some issues with the gaps in your oak flooring in your living room.
Yeah.
Or ripping off the deck.
Yeah.
I'm just going to fix this little air leak, honey.
Yeah. Yeah, I opened up my deck for that sump pipe, and I finally closed it up this weekend. It was open for like a month and a half.
And you couldn't use your deck.
Well, we don't use it that much anyway. I'm not a huge fan of decks.
You're not?
No.
Are you un-American?
No. They're okay.
Oh, my gosh.
So
I just like building decks. I never use them.
Yeah,
That's the fun
they
part.
do go up a lot faster than stone patios. But,
yeah.
But I'll tell you, I moved into my house 16, 17 years ago, and the second year I was there, I built a stone. I was going to build a deck, but we were too close to the lot line, and I figured out that I could get away with building a stone patio without having to do any...
It's not a structure, right?
Doing any,
Permitting?
Well, not permitting. It's like going for a variance,
Uh-huh.
And I'm glad I did, because the thing is, by now I would have done a ton of maintenance to that deck over the past 16 years. And the stone patio, all I do is rake out the gravel and the cracks every couple of years and replace it.
I hear people talking about deck maintenance, and I just roll my eyes because, like, I'm wondering, what are you doing besides like pressure washing it every couple of years?
But that's work. That's one more Saturday I don't have.
I guess. I mean, like, I'm quite fine with my decks turning gray. Like, I don't feel the need to, stain them or whatever. But they do get algae and green.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Patio's never going to fall down.
That's true. It's got gravity in your favor.
Yeah, this deck is attached to your house. It's exposed to the weather. It's going to get wet. It's going to rot eventually.
So
and
you
it's
think he
attached to your
should
house.
pull up some deck boards just to see if it's rotting anyway, right?
Maybe.
Heck, I didn't get him to go for that. Well, that was Jim. Jim, you have two schools of thought on your leaky bow window there, so. Or you could just leave it alone and not worry about it. Right?
Can't do that. It's Canada. It's cold.
It's cold.
It's got cold feet when he stands next to that window.
I wish builders wouldn't do stuff like this, right? That's a really complicating thing to now fix. And, the rest of his house is all brick, and now he's got this like wood thing that's going to need painting and maintenance. I'm just like, why didn't they just make that all the same, plain?
Keep it interesting.
Yeah. Does look a little more interesting than
Do you like
would
it?
have otherwise, I think.
Was that a patio door? Or was it a windows? They were windows.
They were windows, yeah.
Doesn't look like bad. That is of no use.
Not really. It's not like
Too late now.
Yeah.
It looks okay, I guess. But I don't know. I will always
That's a matter of
defer to
opinion.
practicality versus aesthetics, I guess.
Yeah.
Which would explain my clothing choices.
The heated jacket.
Right. Susan in Connecticut writes, a few months ago, I had a carpenter install some new trim to dress up my front door and help it better match the rest of my home's exterior. I neglected to paint the trim right away like he suggested. Now the primed wood is blotchy and is covered with spots of black mold. Can I just paint over the discoloration? Okay, can you? No.
No.
No, you cannot.
Yes, you can, but it won't.
It will not work.
It won't work.
Yeah.
So you got to clean this off, and you probably have to sand the primer a little bit so it gets some tooth for a new coat of primer. Mm-hmm. And she asked, is there an advantage to using a separate primer, or can I use a paint and primer in one like I keep seeing advertised? I see those products too. And coincidentally, I just happened to do a feature article on primers, and I talked to some paint chemists about paint and primers in one.
And?
They are pretty good.
Yeah.
But they're not the best. It's always going to be better to use a separate primer layer. If you're going on something that's previously painted, these paint and primer products work great, as would a regular coat of paint. You don't need to prime all the time, right? Stuff has to be clean, dry, sound. I forget the other thing, but if it's all those things, dull. And you can then paint over it directly. And unless you're really changing the color, there's probably no real reason to start with a primer coat again.
Yeah.
But the primer, in this case, is pre-primed stock, and those are notoriously cheap, right? Because the company that's making those moldings by the gazillions of feet is looking at their bottom line and figuring how to save a few dollars per gallon on primer. And they really don't care how long it lasts, because if it's white in the lumberyard or the home center, that's what people are paying attention to. So,
yeah,
pre-primed products, you should probably reprime. The one thing for her is now that it's cold out, it seems unlikely she's going to be able to get 2 coats of material on in a single day. So maybe in this case, I would say that a paint and primer is better than nothing, but if you can do it over a couple days, it would be better to use a separate base coat of primer.
And clean it first. Use a like bleach and water solution, 1 part bleach, 3 parts water, scrub it, leave it for about 10 minutes, then rinse it off.
Yeah, we actually had an article a few years back, 10 tips to paint like a pro. And
that's Philip Hansel, my absolute favorite painter.
Yeah, and so I'll just pull a couple of the tips out of there, but basically sand or scrape or wire brush before you do the cleaning so that you get as much of that loose, dusty material that might be on there off of there if you do have anything in a situation like that. And, abrading the mold might get some of it off. Scrub it with maybe a Scotch-Brite pad or something like that first. And he was saying that a mixture of TSP, trisodium phosphate, and bleach is a good idea when you're doing the cleaning.
And his secret ingredient is a little squirt of Dawn dish soap.
Really?
Yeah. Because it's a surfactant. It helps to wet, right?
Interesting.
No, I'm not sure. But I do know he puts a Dawn dish soap in there. And chemistry, I'm not sure of.
And he says, of course, use a good primer. And especially in a situation like this, if it's in a situation where it's not that old and it's already getting some mold on it, it's in a wet location. So
and it's outside.
Just use a good quality primer first.
Yeah, don't cheap out on exterior paint because you're just making more work for yourself later. What do you think about the pre-primed stuff you guys have used in the past?
The stuff I've used, I'm buying at the home center, and it's not great.
It's not great, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's fine inside, but even then, sometimes, because it's all finger jointed. And
often,
sometimes, so a lot of those joints will sometimes, not
telegraph.
always, but telegraph through, even through the primer, and, it looks ugly sometimes.
Terrible. When I worked at the lumberyard in Vermont, we sold a ton of that, and from what I've heard, all those trim boards need replaced now. It was like a series of bad glues that stuff is all failing. I would not use that outside.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing to think about in an exterior, depending on no matter what the quality of the wood is, to make sure that it's as protected as possible from the weather. I mean, this is trim that's been added to an exterior, so we don't really know what the details are. I mean,
I really do because I happen to know who the carpenter is.
Okay.
Was it you?
Yes, it was me. So I went back to this lady's house on Sunday to diagnose a troubled switch. Her garage light was not working, and it turned out that the 3-way switch had failed. But she asked me, she's like, remember when I had you trim out the door and you told me to paint it right away? And I said, yeah. She said, well, look what happened. She's like, I didn't paint it. I was like, I can tell. It's a shame, It's really got to take care of that stuff.
And it's definitely mildew, as far as you can tell. Yeah. Also, that's the bleach solution is a good way to test, or bleach is a good way to test. Because, if it disappears right away, it's mildew. If it doesn't, then it's probably dirt. Yeah.
This looked like mold to me.
Yeah.
So Susan's going to have to get painting.
So what are we on to next, Patrick? Are we jumping?
Let's talk about exploding things. That's one of my favorite things. It's not toilet tanks this time, though, right? What is it?
What is it? Oh, it's water heaters.
It's water heaters.
They're not exploding. They're catching on fire, supposedly. Was it A.O. Smith?
I got to look this up.
Something's happening. I guess it's getting holes in the burner or something like that.
Yeah, and it said they start tearing.
Yeah, I think tear. I think when I first read it, I was like, they're tearing?
That's what I said,
tearing.
too.
They're crying.
Is
They
that
got a
because
bunch
we're
of
bad
crying
at
water
English, or
heaters.
is it the same word?
Yeah,
It's the same word.
It's spelled
Same
the
spelling.
same. Yeah.
So
but yeah,
weird.
they get tears in that thing, and then apparently they
all
get a much
context.
more radiant heat than they're supposed to, and if
always-
it's next to wood, it catches on fire.
So
And
wait,
it's a
are
water
we
tank. It
talking
should put
about?
itself out. It's filled with water.
Are we talking about gas water heaters?
Yeah,
here?
it's
Yeah.
a propane, as far as I remember. I didn't read the entire thing.
We figured we should tell people about this, and I was gonna, but now I can't find a link. But I'm gonna dig into it here. You know, the other thing I meant to mention with regard to Jim Collins of Burlington, Ontario's question, where he has the bow window, right? The other thing I thought about is this is a great opportunity to buy a portable inspection camera. Mm-hmm. Then you can drill a hole and actually see what's going on in there. So and they sell for as little as $100 or less on Amazon. So
Yeah.
if you take the science approach, like I always advocate, you'll know what's on the other side and how you can best deal with it. Maybe.
Yeah.
You can't use one of those apps I saw for like the smartphones that lets you
What is it,
see
Wallbot
through
or
the
something?
walls.
I had to
I don't know.
laugh.
I have to. I really want to just see what that thing is because
Boy, they market it heavy to me. I don't know about you guys. Do you get regular stuff in your social media feed for that thing?
I saw it, I think, one time. Yeah, it was kind of weird.
I guess they think you're a sucker, Patrick.
But
Well, I love gadgets. No one would deny that.
I've got a relatively cheap inspection camera. It has like a 25-foot cord or something like that, so you can send it pretty far. And it has its own little Wi-Fi field. And so you connect it to your phone, and that's where the image pops up, and it's pretty sweet.
Is it good?
Yeah, it works great. It has a little light on the end, little LEDs, and so it lights everything up when you stick it down
Does
my
it
chimney.
auto turn? Or are you looking at stuff upside down?
You're looking at stuff in whatever random direction, yeah. So that can be a little disorienting, but it works fine. And you can change out the lens or something. I don't know. It came with some other parts I haven't used, but it's been fine so far.
Yeah, I've toyed around with that Milwaukee 12-volt one that's got the little
That's
cylindrical
the thing
battery.
I was thinking of.
And it worked pretty well. I mean, it only had, I think it had about a 2 or 3 foot gooseneck on it, so you could bend it to the direction you want the camera to go. And for basic identifying wiring and plumbing in a place where you know where you're looking, it seems like it makes a lot of sense.
So have you actually used that successfully to see behind stuff?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what were you looking at?
I was looking for the location of some wiring that I knew was there. And
it helped you?
Yeah.
I've never taken the plunge on one of those, but it's something I've always thought was super cool.
Yeah. Worth it.
Yeah, you'd say?
I'd say so. I can't remember how much mine was. It was probably like $60. It wasn't that much.
That's what I thought.
Made in
It's like,
China.
Yeah, I mean,
If it was between that and tearing my deck off to fix this leaky house, I would totally do that first.
well, especially because, and you've seen this situation so many times, I'm sure, when you're working on an older house that you didn't build, you really don't know what you're going to find when you open something up. And, it's just for a safety sake, when you're worried about wiring or plumbing, it's just a good idea to take a peek before you start smashing walls apart and drilling holes through stuff.
I don't know if I told you guys, but my first construction job was helping my uncle, who was an HVAC contractor. And I was young. I was probably 15 or 16 years old. And he would hire me to, be his flunky during summers and breaks from school. And he left me alone in a expensive condominium one day because we were adding these were originally heated with electric resistance heat, so he was pretty good at convincing folks to install gas furnaces and air conditioning in these very expensive condos because they were impossible to keep comfortable without spending a fortune. And so he left me there to cut into the ceiling to run some duct work. And I remember it was like probably a 16 by 16 inch hole. And I started cutting with this like 9-inch Sawzall blade, right? And I went right through a pair of electrical cables like within seconds, and blue sparks were shooting out of the ceiling. And he went to go do something else, right? So I'm sitting there in this house in the dark, and and then when he came back, I had to tell him that I cut through all the house's wiring with the Sawzall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did he take that?
I don't remember. I mean, it must have been pretty well because I would have remembered otherwise, but...
Well, unless he just knocked you senseless and
no.
you have no recollection of the rest of the day.
He was not easy to get along with, but he was pretty patient with me. Like, he had trouble with lots of other folks, but we got along pretty good. And I owe him a lot for my knowledge and interest in building matters, I must say. And he owes that guy a new electrical service.
So the camera might not have helped in this situation, but a friend of mine had cut some trim for his bathroom in his house. And this was some 70s house that was built on a slab. And so there was no basement underneath this bathroom. So the plumbing must have been coming up through the slab into the sink and the toilet and everything. And he had cut the pieces of wood and hadn't had a chance to nail them in yet. And his wife was like, oh, I'm going to help him out. And she came in with a box of finishing nails and a hammer and put up one of the pieces of wood, and she nailed it up, and he came home and he found this puddle on the floor in the bathroom. And he pulled the trim off the wall, and water started spraying out from the copper pipe that was right behind where she had nailed the trim in place. And she said, you know, that last nail was really hard
to get in.
So luckily he was high enough above the slab that he was able to patch it back together. But,
Man. And the thing is, if you put I don't know if you folks know this out there, but if you put a drywall screw into a copper water line, you don't know it right away because it takes like a couple weeks for it to start leaking until the screw starts to corrode. That's another thing I know the hard way.
It's like a ticking time bomb.
It is. It takes a surprisingly long time for it to start leaking. I had, I think, a Habitat volunteer. So, you know, the nail plates only protect the framing, right? They protect the pipe where it runs through the framing, but they don't protect the pipe like on either side of it, right? So if you have really bad aim, you can put a screw right into a pipe and not even know it.
Yeah.
And it holds great.
Yeah.
The copper's got great holding ability. All right, so back to the water heater thing, and then I think we're going to have to call it quits for the day, unfortunately. According to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, residential 30, 40, and 50-gallon natural and propane gas-fired ultra-low NOx, is that nitrous oxides, Rob? Ultra-low NOx, nitrous oxides water heaters are being recalled. And the water heater's gas burner screen develops tears, whatever, and the water heater can then create excess radiant heat, posing a fire hazard if the water heater is installed directly on a wood or other combustible floor. So if you have one of these and it's on a wood floor, you probably want to contact 866-854-2793, or you can go to their website, waterheaterrecall.com. 866-854-2793, water heater recall, and good luck with that. Well, thanks for being here, guys. It's always a pleasure.
While you're mentioning contact information, don't forget about ours.
Go ahead.
If anybody wants to talk to us, whether they have issues with some of our advice or want some more advice or just want to say hi, it's fhpodcast@taunton.com. Is that correct?
I have a lot of problems with the advice given today. That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Remember to send us your questions, like Rob said, at fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Thank you all for listening, and please remember to like, comment, or review us on your favorite way to listen to us. Happy building.